of this year in February, I stood on this stage in front of this mic, and I told a story that had ripple effects kind of across the universe. And the ripple effects were the responsibility of a nosy audience member. And she's here tonight, but I'm not going to point her out because we have to be kind. So as a recap, because I'm sure you're not all the same audience from February, the February story was about how my parents wound up getting married. So I'll just give a quick recap of that story. The story was that my mother was just out of high school, and she was dating this guy who worked at the same building as her, and he was this tall, handsome, redheaded Irish Catholic man. My grandparents were Methodists, and they were really worried about that word Catholic because it was the 1950s, and Catholics only had one form of birth control, which was called the rhythm method. My grandparents had seen my mom and this guy Jack dance together and knew that neither one of them had any sense of rhythm. And so they were really worried she was going to wind up with like a baseball team of redheaded, freckled offspring. And so they said to her, like, we don't really want to meddle, but we're just respectfully asking you, please go out on a date with at least one other person before you and Jack get too serious. And so my mom talks to Jack, and Jack says, she's like, I'm really sorry, but I can't go out with you again until I go out with someone else. And so Jack's like, all right, I'll find someone to take you out. So he asks his buddy from the mailroom, this guy named Bob, do me this favor, take Bonnie out, meet the parents, satisfy this requirement, and then we can resume our relationship. So this guy, Bob, shows up, takes my mom out, meets the grandparents, et cetera, whatever. They were satisfied. They never meddled in her dating life again. And a couple years later, she walks down the aisle. She marries the man of her dreams, this tall, red-headed Irish Catholic guy named Bob. And Jack, the guy who my dad gave the brotherly shove to, disappeared, never to be heard from again, right? And we've always wondered, what happened to Jack Ryan? He could have been my father, right? I wonder if my dad crushed his soul. I wonder if he ever married anyone else. Wonder what became of him. But because his name is Jack Ryan, and because Tom Clancy wrote a book called The Hunt for Red October, this guy is basically ungoogleable, right? So we can't get closure until the nosy audience member at the Moth says, I am going to find Jack Ryan come hell or high water, and she did. So here's the sequel to this story. So I have to be more specific. What she found was his obituary. Yeah, he had just died a couple of months before I told this story. And because he died, his obituary had a lot more details, like the fact that he worked in the mailroom, and it was easier to find him. But anyway, the obituary showed that my dad hadn't ruined his life because it said that he was funny, he was a prankster, he was a ladies' man. He had been married twice, and he had 6 children from 2 marriages that he referred to as the first litter and the second litter. So my family decided it would have been okay if he was our dad, even though we love my dad, right? No offense to my dad. So I thought about how it feels to be the daughter of a dearly departed dad myself. And so I did what any of you would have done. It's a perfectly reasonable thing for a stranger to do. I went to the funeral home website and I signed the guest book. And I wrote to them, Dear litter number 1 and litter number 2. I thought you'd be interested to know that in a parallel universe, there could have been a litter number 3. And there's a gentleman here, I can't see him because the lights are in my eye, but his name is Bob, just like my dad. He films all the storytellers. So I got my hands on the film of my story about my mom and Jack Ryan and my dad, and I attached that, I uploaded that where you can put photos in the guest book at the funeral home for the stranger you never met. And, a couple of months go by, and I get an email from the firstborn of litter number 2, and she says, my dad's been gone several months. We don't check the funeral home guest book anymore, but we just found your note and your video, and we love it. And they were curious, did my mother have any other stories about their dad? They were coming up on the anniversary of his death. So I sat down with my mom and the recording app on my phone, and I asked her to tell stories about Jack. And she recounted, movies and dinner and dancing and hijinks on the Ocean City Boardwalk. And she was like teleported, and she laughed so hard she snorted. and I sent this little, audio recording off to Christy, litter number 2, and she shared it with all her siblings. And I thought, okay, this is a happy ending to this story, but the universe wasn't done with me yet, because the audience member here was not the only person who went full-on Nancy Drew. Somebody else who used to work with Jack Ryan found out he had died and found my video and found my phone number. I don't know if Jack Ryan is training a whole army of Inspector Clouseaus, but I get this phone call from California from this older woman with a raspy voice, 1 part sandpaper, 2 parts chocolate chip cookies, that old lady voice. And she says, "Are you the person who posted the video about Jack Ryan?" And I said, "Yes." And then she went on to talk to me for an hour about how much she liked this guy and what he meant to her. And she relived all these memories. And what I came to conclude from all of this is that you can spend 1 5-minute story here on this stage that can have ripple effects that touch a whole bunch of people, that bring people back to life even for a short amount of time, and that the stories that we share really matter. Our families really matter. And just by telling a story, a stranger picked up the phone and called me. A daughter was thrilled to hear about her dad. A family I never knew I had was stitched together. This what they could have been, the third universe, the third litter. And I think that's just about the happiest ending of all to the story, because our families matter and our stories matter. Thank you.
Keep it going for Karen Reiner.